The first note appeared on a cold October morning when the autumn fog had yet to lift from over the sleeping city. I opened the door of my third-floor apartment in an old panel building intending to leave for work and saw a white sheet of paper neatly folded in half. At first, I thought it was some kind of advertisement or a notice from the management company. Something was always breaking down in our building. Either the heating would be off or the water. But when I unfolded the sheet, I saw only 2 lines written in neat handwriting with a blue pen. "You're next. It will all end soon." The handwriting was unfamiliar, yet something about it seemed strangely familiar, as if I had seen these letters, these flourishes, and the slant of the lines somewhere before. Back then, I didn't pay it much mind. I thought it was someone's silly joke, perhaps neighborhood kids or teenagers from the next yard. Our area had plenty of youngsters who might entertain themselves with such pranks. I crumpled the note and threw it into the trash can near the entrance, not even realizing that this moment would be the beginning of something terrible, something that would turn my life upside down and make me doubt my own sanity. My life then could hardly be called happy or even just normal. I worked as an accountant in a small construction company that dealt with apartment renovations and minor building works. The salary was modest, but enough to live in the one-room apartment I had been renting for 3 years. The landlady, an elderly woman named Anna Petrovna, lived in a neighboring city with her daughter, and only appeared once a month to collect the rent. She was quiet and inconspicuous, never asking unnecessary questions about my personal life, which suited me perfectly. My personal life, to be honest, was non-existent. 2 years had passed since my divorce, but I hadn't been able to form relationships with other women. Maria left me for her boss, taking with her not only our shared property, but also the last remnants of my faith in people. She said I had become detached, that I had stopped being interested in life, that it was impossible to communicate with me normally. Perhaps she was right. After I was laid off from my previous job at a large company where I had worked for 7 years, I really did become a different person. I withdrew into myself, stopped trusting people, began to suspect everyone around me of insincerity and lies. I had no friends either. Those who remained after the divorce gradually drifted away, tired of my gloomy mood and constant complaints about life. And I myself wasn't particularly eager for company. I preferred to spend evenings at home reading books or watching movies online. Sometimes I would walk around the city alone, especially enjoying wandering through the old districts where Stalin-era houses with their massive walls and high ceilings still stood. These walks calmed me, helping me distract myself from intrusive thoughts of failures and disappointments. The second note appeared a week later. I had already forgotten about the first when, leaving my apartment in the morning, I again saw a white sheet under the door. This time my heart skipped a beat. There was something unsettling in this repetition. The note was written in the same handwriting with the same blue pen. "Time is passing. You're getting closer." I stood in the hallway holding that cursed sheet with trembling hands, feeling a shiver run down my spine. Someone was clearly watching me, knew my daily routine, knew when I left the house. I tried to remember if I had seen anyone suspicious lately, if I had noticed being followed. But nothing came to mind. My days were monotonous and predictable. Work in the morning, home in the evening, grocery shopping on weekends, or short walks around the city. I lived like a ghost, attracting no attention, making no acquaintances, taking no part in the lives of those around me. Who would want to stalk such a gray and inconspicuous person as me? The third note appeared a few more days later. Now every morning I opened the door with bated breath, afraid to see another message. And there it was, counting the days. Soon, you will understand. This time I decided not to throw the note away, but to keep it. At home, I carefully examined the handwriting under a magnifying glass I used for working with small documents. The letters were neatly formed, without haste, as if the writer enjoyed the process. Some of the flourishes and the slant of the letters seemed familiar to me, but I just couldn't figure out where I might have seen such handwriting before. Sleep began to elude me. At night, I lay in bed listening to every sound in the stairwell, every rustle outside the door. The old house was full of sounds. Floorboards creaked, heating pipes clanged, doors slammed somewhere. Before, these sounds didn't bother me, but now each of them could mean that someone was creeping towards my door, preparing to leave another note. I started getting up in the middle of the night and going to the door, listening to see if anyone was on the landing. But there was always only darkness and silence. Work began to suffer. I started making mistakes in calculations, confusing numbers, forgetting important meetings. My boss, Viktor Semenovich, a gruff but generally fair man, reprimanded me several times. He said I looked tired, that I needed to take a vacation or at least a few days off. But how could I explain to him that I was being stalked by an unknown person leaving threatening notes? It would sound like the rambling of a madman. The fourth note was different. Instead of threats, it said, "You don't remember, but I remember everything, every night." These words shook me to the core. What was I supposed to remember? What nights? I sifted through all the events of the past months in my memory, trying to find something unusual that could explain these mysterious messages. But my life was so monotonous that there was no room in it for secrets and mysteries. The fifth note appeared 3 days later, and it truly made me question my mental state. On the paper was written, "You see me in the mirror, but you don't recognize me. We are one." I reread these lines dozens of times, trying to grasp their meaning. What did "see in the mirror" mean? Was the person writing these notes somehow connected to me? Or was it just a psychological game, an attempt to drive me insane? That same day, I decided to install video surveillance. I bought a small camera that could record in the dark and set it up in the hallway, pointing at my door. If someone was placing notes, I would surely catch them on film. The camera ran on a battery and could record for several hours continuously. I configured it to start recording upon motion detection, but the first few nights of recordings yielded no results. The video only showed me leaving the apartment in the morning and finding the note already lying under the door. No one came at night, no one slipped the papers. It was impossible, yet the fact remained. The notes appeared as if out of nowhere, materializing on their own. I began to doubt the camera's operation. Perhaps it was faulty, or maybe someone was very skillfully avoiding the visible area. I moved the camera to another spot, checked all the viewing angles, but the result was the same. The notes continued to appear, and on the video there was no one but myself. The sixth note was very short. "Tonight." Just 2 words, but they filled me with such dread that I couldn't go to work. I called Viktor Semenovich, told him I wasn't feeling well, that I had a fever. He grumbled something about irresponsibility, but let me off. I spent the entire day at home, pacing the apartment, unable to settle. What was supposed to happen that night? What did the unknown person expect of me? I checked all the locks, slid the chain bolt, even moved a heavy armchair against the door. But all these precautions seemed meaningless against someone who could leave notes without appearing on camera. The night passed quietly. I barely slept, going to the door every half hour to listen. But no one came. In the morning, when I opened the door, there was no note. For the first time in weeks, nothing lay under the door. I felt a strange relief mixed with disappointment. Perhaps whoever it was, they had finally left me alone. But my relief was premature. The seventh note appeared not under the door, but inside my own apartment. I found it in the morning on the kitchen table, next to the cup from which I had drunk tea the evening before. The paper lay there as if placed specifically so I couldn't miss it. It read, "You're beginning to understand. We can't be without each other." My world collapsed. Someone had entered my apartment despite all the locks and precautions. Someone had been here while I slept, just meters away from me, able to do anything. I searched the entire apartment, checked every corner, every closet, looked under the bed and behind the curtains. No one was there, but the feeling of another person's presence lingered. I checked all the windows. They were locked from the inside. The door was also locked with all bolts, the chain hanging in its place. How could someone have gotten into the apartment? Maybe someone had keys. I immediately called Anna Petrovna, the landlady. She was surprised by my call and assured me she hadn't given keys to anyone. Only she and I had them. Then I hypothesized that someone might have made a duplicate set of keys. But when and how? I hardly went anywhere. My keys were always with me. The only place I might have left them unattended was at work, when I hung my jacket in the locker. But which of my colleagues would be interested in my keys, and why? The 8th note appeared in my bedroom on my pillow. I found it in the morning when I woke up. So someone had been in the room while I slept, standing by my bed watching me sleep. This thought was so terrifying that I felt nauseous. The note read, "You sleep so deeply. Don't worry, I won't harm you, not yet." I couldn't stay in the apartment any longer. I packed the most essential items and went to a hotel on the other side of the city. I rented a room for a week, hoping I could hide there from my stalker. But even in the hotel, I didn't feel safe. It constantly felt like someone was watching me, that another note could appear at any moment. The first 2 days at the hotel passed peacefully. I barely left the room, ordered food through delivery service, watched TV, tried to read. But concentrating on anything was impossible. My thoughts constantly returned to the notes, to the mysterious stalker, to how they could enter my apartment. On the 3rd day, I decided to return to work. I couldn't hide in a hotel indefinitely. Viktor Semenovich greeted me without much enthusiasm, saying I looked terrible, that I needed to see a doctor. Perhaps he was right. I did look awful. I'd lost weight. Dark circles appeared under my eyes and my hands sometimes trembled for no reason. Working was difficult. I was constantly distracted, listening to sounds in the office, watching people who passed my desk. Anyone could be the stalker. Lyuba, the secretary, who was always friendly to me, suddenly seemed suspicious. What if it was her? What if she somehow got my keys and was breaking into my apartment? But then I realized the absurdity of such suspicions. Lyuba was an ordinary middle-aged woman, a mother of 2 who had worked at our firm for many years. Why would she need to stalk me? Besides, the handwriting on the notes was clearly not feminine. Too firm, too confident. The 9th note awaited me at the hotel. I found it on the nightstand next to the bed when I returned from work. The hotel administrator assured me that no one had entered my room, that only I had the key. But the note was there, as if it had materialized out of thin air. It read, "You can't hide from me. We are connected forever." I realized that running was pointless. Whoever this was, they would always find me. They knew where I lived, where I worked, where I hid. They could enter any place, pass through any locks and obstacles. This wasn't just stalking. It was something supernatural, inexplicable. The 10th note was the strangest. I found it in the morning in the pocket of my jacket, though I distinctly remembered that the pockets had been empty the night before. The note read, "Look closely in the mirror. Look at your hands." I walked to the mirror in the room and began to examine my reflection. My face was pale, haggard, my eyes red from lack of sleep. But something in my gaze seemed unfamiliar, alien. Then I looked at my hands. They were trembling, my palms damp with sweat. But what struck me most was that under the nails of my right hand were traces of blue ink, the very ink with which all the notes had been written. Where did it come from? I didn't remember writing anything with a blue pen in recent days. The 11th note appeared in my own hand. I woke up in the morning and found myself holding a crumpled piece of paper in my clenched fist. It read, "You're almost ready to know the truth. Just a little more." My own handwriting. I recognized it immediately, even though the letters were more neatly formed than usual. This was impossible. I didn't remember writing this note. I didn't remember writing anything at night at all. but the handwriting was definitely mine, and the ink under my nails spoke for itself. Could it be that I was leaving all these notes myself? Had I gone so insane that I didn't remember my own actions? I tried to recall last night. I went to bed around 11, read before sleep, then turned off the light. After that, a blank. I woke up in the morning with the note in my hand, remembering nothing of what happened between falling asleep and waking. Could I be a sleepwalker? Could I be walking around at night without realizing it? The 12th note was written in different handwriting, more sprawling, less neat. It read, "Hello, Master. Time to get acquainted." I recognized this handwriting too. It was my usual handwriting, the one I used when writing in a hurry, not bothering with neatness. So I was writing the notes myself, but in different states of consciousness. The 13th note was very short. "Don't sleep tonight, observe." I decided to follow this advice. I lay in bed but didn't close my eyes. I pretended to be asleep but carefully watched everything around me. Hour after hour passed. Nothing happened. I was beginning to think this night would be normal when I suddenly felt a strange drowsiness. My eyelids grew heavy, my thoughts became clouded. I fought off sleep, understanding that this was something unnatural, but my strength was leaving me. The last thing I remember is my right hand reaching for the nightstand where the blue pen lay. And then, darkness. I woke up on the floor beside the bed. My arm ached as if I'd been writing for a long time. Several inscribed sheets of paper lay on the nightstand, and next to them a blue pen without a cap. I struggled to get up and picked up the papers, my handwriting, but a completely unfamiliar text. The lines were uneven, the letters sometimes small, sometimes large, as if they weren't written by me but by someone else using my hand. The first sheet began with the words, "Finally, you are ready to hear me. I have waited so long for this moment." It then detailed how I had infiltrated the real me's brain many years ago, gradually strengthening its influence, learning to control the body while the host slept. The text was written from the perspective of some entity that called itself my companion and claimed that we were now inseparable. The second sheet described my nocturnal wanderings, of which I remembered nothing. Apparently, I regularly got up at night, dressed, and left the house. I roamed the city, visited places I had never been to during the day, and spoke with people I didn't know. This companion recounted such details of my supposed nocturnal excursions that I involuntarily believed them. It knew the layout of streets I had never visited and described the faces of people I hadn't met. The third sheet was the most frightening. It spoke of other people whom this companion called previous hosts. It turned out I wasn't the first one it had chosen. Before me there were others, men and women of various ages who, just like me, found notes, lost sleep, and went mad with fear. They all ended the same way, committing suicide, unable to withstand the psychological pressure. And the companion moved on to a new victim. The fourth sheet contained a plan. My own suicide plan written in my hand, but not by me. It meticulously detailed the time, place, and method. Everything was thought out to the smallest detail. How to make the death appear accidental. How to leave no traces of what had happened in recent weeks. The companion even took care to destroy all the notes so no one would guess the true cause of my death. Reading these sheets, I felt my sanity finally abandoning me. Was all of this truly real? Was there truly some creature living inside me, controlling my actions? But how was that possible? I had always been a rational person, not believing in mysticism or paranormal phenomena. There had to be a logical, scientific explanation. Perhaps it was schizophrenia. Maybe I had a dissociative identity disorder and a second personality only manifested during sleep. I had read about such cases, people performing actions they later couldn't remember, writing texts that seemed alien to them. But why did it start now? Why at my age? I tried to remember when the problems began. The notes appeared in October, but perhaps something had been happening earlier. Now that I knew about my nocturnal walks, much became clearer. The morning fatigue I attributed to insomnia. The dirty shoes I found by the front door, unable to figure out where the dust and mud came from. The strange dreams that were too realistic, too detailed. I recalled one particularly vivid dream from last month. I dreamed I was walking down an unfamiliar street in the old part of the city. The houses on either side were pre-revolutionary buildings with high windows and massive doors. I entered one of the houses, ascended a wooden staircase to the second floor. There an elderly woman greeted me, speaking as if we had known each other for a long time. She offered me tea and cookies, and we talked for a long time about something important, but upon waking I couldn't remember what exactly. Now I understood that it wasn't a dream. I had indeed walked through that district, indeed entered that house, but consciously, I had never been there. This meant my body was performing actions without the involvement of my consciousness. It was terrifying to realize that I wasn't entirely in control of myself, that most of the time I was as if in a semi-slumber, not noticing what was happening around me. The fifth sheet, which I found the next morning, was written in completely different handwriting. The letters were crude, uncertain, as if written by a child or someone just learning to write. The text said, "Help me. I don't want to die. It's not me writing these notes. There's someone inside me." This sheet was written by the real me, my true self, trying to break free from the companion's control. The sixth sheet appeared the same day, but in the familiar neat handwriting of the companion. "Don't resist. It will only prolong your suffering. Look what happened to those who tried to fight." Then followed a list of names and dates. 17 people in the last 10 years. All of them had committed suicide in a state of deep depression, leaving no explanation for their actions. I decided to verify this information. I found reports of incidents on the internet for the specified dates. Indeed, all these people had committed suicide. Moreover, the circumstances of death were very similar. All of them were found in their apartments. No suicide notes, no visible reasons for suicide. Relatives and friends claimed that the deceased had acted strangely in recent weeks, complaining of insomnia, becoming withdrawn and suspicious. One article particularly caught my attention. It spoke of the death of a 35-year-old programmer, Andrei Volkov. He was found hanged in his own apartment. Neighbors said that in recent days he had barely slept, wandered his apartment at night muttering to himself. Many text files written at various times during the night were found on his computer. The content of these files was not disclosed, but it was stated that they represented incoherent notes of a person in a state of mental disorder. I realized I was in the same situation. The companion had chosen me as its next victim and was gradually bringing me to a state where suicide would seem the only way out. But now that I knew of its existence, I had a chance. I could fight. I could try to get rid of this creature, or at least resist its influence. The seventh sheet was a warning. "You've learned too much. Now you'll have to pay for your curiosity. Tonight it will all end." I understood that the companion was going to force me to commit suicide, but I wasn't going to give up without a fight. I tied myself to the bed with ropes I found in the pantry. I tied my hands and feet so that I couldn't get up, even if the companion tried to take control of my body. Beside the bed, I placed a voice recorder that was supposed to record everything that would happen during the night. Perhaps it would help me understand the nature of the companion and find a way to get rid of it. That night was the most terrifying of my life. Around midnight, I felt my consciousness begin to blur. My eyelids grew heavy, my thoughts slowed down. But I fought, biting my tongue to stay awake. The ropes painfully dug into my wrists, but I ignored it. After some time, I heard a voice. My own voice, but saying something I wasn't thinking. The voice was angry, irritated. "Why are you complicating everything? Untie yourself and we'll finish this quickly and painlessly. You won't be able to resist me forever anyway." I tried to answer, but words continued to come out of my mouth that were not my own. "Do you think ropes will save you? I can make you chew through them with your teeth, or strangle yourself with them. I have many ways to finish you." The struggle continued all night. My body twitched, trying to free itself from the ropes. My hands uncontrollably clenched into fists, my legs tried to stand. I felt the companion trying to take full control of my body, but the ropes prevented it. By morning, the companion's strength waned. I was left alone in my body, exhausted but alive. The voice recorder captured everything that happened. Listening to the recording, I was horrified. Most of the night, I had been talking to myself in different voices. Sometimes it was my usual voice, sometimes a lower, hoarse, malicious one. At times, it seemed as if two different people were in the room arguing with each other. The 8th sheet appeared in the morning, despite me being tied up all night. It lay on the floor next to the bed, although I distinctly remembered there being nothing there the night before. The sheet read, "You won this battle, but not the war. I will become stronger. I will find a way to get rid of you." I understood that the companion was not going to give up. It would seek new ways to influence me until it got its way. I needed help, but whom to turn to? Who would believe such an incredible story? Psychiatrists would decide I had schizophrenia and send me to the hospital. I had no friends. Relatives lived far away and would hardly understand my situation. I decided to search for information about similar cases. Maybe there were people who had faced similar problems and found a solution. I spent a whole day in the library studying medical literature, psychology books, even works on parapsychology and mysticism. What interested me most was an article about parasites that influence the behavior of their hosts. I knew about the existence of such parasites in nature. For example, a fungus that infects ants and makes them climb high plants so the fungal spores can spread over a larger area. Or a parasite that makes mice lose their fear of cats so they get eaten and the parasite can enter a new host's body. But could there be a parasite that affects human behavior? A parasite that lives in the brain and can control thoughts and actions? Official science doesn't recognize such cases, but online I found several forums where people shared similar stories. Most of the stories sounded like the ravings of madmen, but some were very similar to my situation. People described the appearance of notes, nocturnal walks they didn't remember, the feeling of a foreign consciousness present in their body. Some claimed they managed to get rid of the parasite with special medications or meditative practices. Others simply disappeared from the forums and no one knew what happened to them. One story particularly caught my attention. A woman named Elena recounted that the parasite entered her body after visiting an old abandoned house. She was interested in the history of her city and often explored old buildings. In one of these houses, she found a room full of old books and documents. Among them was a notebook with Latin inscriptions which she tried to read aloud. After that, she started having problems very similar to mine. Notes, nocturnal walks, the feeling of a foreign consciousness. But Elena managed to find a way to fight back. She returned to that house, found the notebook, and burned it. After that, the parasite disappeared and she no longer experienced problems. I tried to contact Elena, but her forum account had been deleted. Her last message was dated 2 years ago. I didn't know if she had truly managed to get rid of the parasite or if something bad had happened to her. The 9th sheet was a threat. "You are looking for a way to get rid of me, but I am not going anywhere. We are bound forever. The more you resist, the more agonizing your death will be." I understood that I had little time left. The companion was becoming more aggressive, more persistent. Sooner or later, it would find a way to force me to commit suicide. The 10th sheet was written in my handwriting, but not by me. "I can't take this anymore. Every day is a struggle, every night is a nightmare. I'm tired of fighting. Maybe it's better to just give up." This was the companion's attempt to break my will, to make me believe that the fight was meaningless. But I wasn't going to give up. I had a plan. If the companion was truly some kind of parasite living in my brain, then there had to be a way to get rid of it. A medical way. Perhaps strong antibiotics or antiparasitic drugs would help. or electroshock therapy, which would disrupt the connections in the brain and force the parasite to leave my body. The 11th sheet contained a warning. Don't try to treat yourself. Any medication will only worsen your condition. I know what you are planning and I won't let you do it. So the companion truly feared medical intervention. This gave me hope. The 12th sheet was the final warning. Tomorrow night it will all end. You won't be able to resist anymore. Forgive your loved ones for what they will have to endure. I understood that I had only one day left. If I didn't find a way to get rid of the companion before tomorrow night, I would be doomed. On the morning of the last day, I woke with the sensation that my body was no longer my own. My arms and legs felt like lead. My head throbbed with pain, and a constant hum, like a whisper in an unknown language, filled my ears. The companion was preparing for the final takeover of my consciousness, and I felt my resistance waning with each passing hour. The 13th note lay on the kitchen table, written in handwriting that grew increasingly sloppy, as if the hand holding the pen trembled with impatience. Today you will know the whole truth. I will show you who I am and where I came from. Perhaps then you will understand that resistance is futile. I took the paper with trembling fingers and felt the letters begin to blur before my eyes. The companion was even affecting my vision, preparing me for complete subjugation. I went to the city hospital, hoping to find a doctor who would agree to examine my brain. But already in the reception area, I realized the companion wouldn't allow me to get medical help. My tongue refused to obey. Words came out incoherently, and when I tried to explain my problem to the nurse, entirely different phrases escaped my mouth. Excuse me, I've come to the wrong address. I need to be somewhere else. I left the hospital against my will, my feet carrying me along familiar streets, but the route was not my choice. The companion was leading me somewhere, and I was powerless to resist. Only now did I understand how strong its influence had become. It could control not only my actions in sleep, but also in a waking state, when I desperately tried to maintain control. We walked through the old part of the city, past pre-revolutionary houses that I recognized from my dreams. It turned out the companion had led me here many times, studying the area, preparing for the final act. We stopped before a 3-story red brick house, its facade adorned with stucco and wrought iron balconies. The house looked abandoned. Windows were boarded up, and a padlock hung on the door, but the companion knew how to get inside. My hands automatically reached for the downspout, and I began to climb to the 2nd floor. My body's physical capabilities seemed to increase several-fold. I moved with an agility and confidence I never had. The 2nd-story balcony was half ruined, but I managed to squeeze through a gap in the window frame. Inside the house it was dim, smelling of mold and decay. The corridor was littered with old furniture and construction debris, but the companion knew the way. We passed into a back room where an old writing desk stood, piled with books and papers. This place was familiar to me from my nocturnal walks. This was where the companion had forced me to write the notes. On the table lay a thick leather-bound notebook filled from the first to the last page. I opened it and saw entries made in dozens of different handwritings. Each handwriting belonged to one of the companion's victims. All those people who had found the Your Next notes and eventually committed suicide. Here were the entries of Andrei Volkov, the programmer, Marina Kozlova, the teacher, Sergei Petrov, the engineer. All 17 people who had become victims of the companion over the past 10 years. I read their entries, and the picture became clearer. The companion was not an ordinary parasite. It was something ancient, something that existed long before humans appeared. According to the entries, it could move from one host to another, but not just like that. It needed time to fully subjugate the victim's consciousness, and then it used their body to find the next host. One entry particularly caught my attention. It was written in a young woman's handwriting and dated 5 years ago. I understand what it is. It's not a parasite in the usual sense. It's a consciousness that can only exist inside a human brain. It feeds on our emotions, our fears, our thoughts. The more we fear, the stronger it becomes, but it has a weakness. It cannot exist in a dead body. That's why it forces us to commit suicide only after it finds the next victim. The subsequent entries were made in the same handwriting but became increasingly frantic, illegible. It's showing me images of the next victim. A middle-aged man lives alone, works as an accountant. It chooses lonely people because no one will look for them if they disappear. I must write the first note and place it under his door. This is part of the transition ritual. I realized I was reading the entries of the woman who had chosen me as the next victim. She had fought the companion just as I was fighting, but eventually gave in. The last entry was short. "Forgive me, stranger, I can't resist any longer. Tomorrow I will place the first note under your door, and tonight I will hang myself." Now I understood the entire mechanism. The companion couldn't simply jump from one person to another. It needed a ritual, a series of actions that created a link between the old and new victim. The notes weren't just a means of intimidation. They were a way of transmitting the companion from one host to another. Each note contained a fragment of its consciousness, and when the victim read them, they unwittingly let it into their mind. The 14th sheet appeared right before my eyes. I watched as my hand took the pen and began to write words I wasn't thinking. "Now you know the truth. I have existed for thousands of years, moving from one host to another. People have given me many names: demon, fiend, evil spirit. But I am simply a life form that needs human consciousness to exist." The next paragraph was written in a different hand, my usual one, but the words still belonged to the companion. "I do no harm unnecessarily. Each host lives a full life while I prepare for the transition. You don't even suspect my presence. Problems only begin when it's time to find a new host." The third paragraph was written in very clumsy handwriting, as if the hand was disobedient. "But you proved too strong. You resist more than anyone before you. This complicates the transition process. I am forced to resort to more radical measures." I felt the companion beginning to fully seize my body. My muscles tensed, my breathing quickened, my heart pounded like crazy. But at the same time, my mind became unusually clear. I understood that a final battle was taking place between us, and the outcome of this battle would determine not only my fate but also the fate of the next victim. The 15th sheet was written in my handwriting, but it was no longer the companion. It was me, the real me, fighting for control over my own body. "I will not let you find a new victim. If you cannot exist in a dead body, then I will commit suicide right now before you can choose someone." The 16th sheet appeared instantly, written in the companion's neat handwriting. "You won't be able to do that. I control your body. Besides, I've already chosen the next victim. A young woman who works in the library where you looked for information about me. She is lonely, vulnerable, perfectly suited for my purposes." I remembered the librarian who helped me find books about parasites. A young woman with sad eyes who worked in the reading room. She was friendly to me, interested in what I was studying. The thought that the companion could pass to her filled me with rage. The 17th sheet was the last. "Do not resist. In an hour you will go to the library and place the first note under her house door, and tonight you will hang yourself in this room. Your body will be found in a few days when the smell starts. It will look like the suicide of a lonely person who couldn't bear depression, but I wasn't going to give up. I had a plan. Desperate, insane, but it was the only way to stop the companion. If it couldn't exist in a dead body, then I had to die before it could complete the transition ritual to a new victim. But simply committing suicide wasn't enough. I had to do it in a way that the companion couldn't do anything. I found a coil of rope in the room that the workers who repaired the house had used. The rope was strong, thick. I tried to tie a noose, but my hands wouldn't obey. The companion tried to hinder me, but I was persistent. Every movement was accomplished with immense difficulty. Every knot required titanic efforts of will. When the noose was ready, I felt the companion making one last attempt to take full control of my body. My muscles cramped, my vision darkened, but I didn't stop. I tied the rope to a ceiling beam and put the noose around my neck. At the last moment, the companion spoke in my voice, but I heard its words as if from afar. "You think you've won, but you haven't. I will find a way to move on to the next victim. I have existed for thousands of years, and I will exist for thousands of years after your death." But I knew it was bluffing. According to the notes in the notebook, the transition ritual had to be completed in a strict order. First, the victim had to receive all the notes. Then the previous host had to choose a place for their death. And only then could they commit suicide. If I died before the first note was placed for the new victim, the companion wouldn't be able to transfer to her. I stepped forward and the noose tightened around my neck. The last thing I remember was the companion's furious scream, which sounded in my head like the howl of a wounded beast. It realized that I had outwitted it, that for the first time in thousands of years of its existence, it was trapped. Oxygen stopped reaching my brain and I felt consciousness fade. But at the same time, I felt incredible relief. The struggle was over. The companion would no longer harm me or anyone else. I had defeated it in the only way I could, by sacrificing myself. In the last moments of my life, I thought of the librarian who would come to work tomorrow and wonder why I no longer came to the reading room. She would never know that I saved her from the fate that awaited me. No one would ever know about this story because all the notes and the notebook would remain in the abandoned house where no one would find them. My death would appear as the suicide of a mentally ill person who succumbed to depression. The police would find my body, conduct a formal investigation, and close the case. Anna Petrovna, the landlady, would regret losing a reliable tenant. Viktor Semenovich would find a new accountant. Life would go on as usual, and no one would know that on this day there was one less ancient evil in the world. As the rope finally cut off my breath, I felt the companion make a last attempt to leave my body. But it was too late. My brain ceased to function, and the being, which could only live in a living consciousness, died with me. Its howl in my head grew fainter until it disappeared completely. I died with a smile on my lips, knowing that I had made the right choice. The millennia-long chain of deaths was finally broken. The companion would kill no one else, force no one to find your next notes, and drive no one to suicide. My death was not a defeat, but a victory, the last and most important victory in my life. 3 days later, my body was found by workers who came to continue renovating the house. The police declared it a suicide caused by a mental disorder. The notebook with the companion's victim's entries was deemed the ravings of a madman and burned along with the other papers found in the house. Thus ended the story of a man who became the last victim of an ancient evil. But unlike all previous victims, he did not merely die. He destroyed his killer, sacrificing himself to save all future victims. And though no one would ever know of his feat, the world became a little safer.